Hello, this is my presentation, Britannia. How Romanized was it? In other words, how influential was the Roman Empire in this territory? So, let me get it ready, screen. So concepts we're going to be going over will include the cultural influence of Rome, noteworthy figures contributing, as well as how ancient Rome interacted with pre-colonized and post-colonized Roman Britannia. Side note, Celts are a name for Britain, uh, but not necessarily homogeneity, not being a homogeneity among this territory. They all spoke a Celtic language, but still an oversimplification of these peoples, in case that comes up while I'm speaking. Okay, so pre-colonized Britannia is important, very important to acknowledge the difference of pre-colonized Britannia so as to understand the dramatic changes that would take place. Britannia had been trading with their Gallic neighbors on the European mainland since the 5th century BC, about that time. And this would connect Rome to them and influence how quickly conquest would arrive once Rome conquered the Gauls. So kind of worked to Rome's benefit that they were so connected economically. Britannia was seen as a frontier of a frontier. So these uncivilized peoples, as they were perceived by the Romans, were even worse than the Gauls because they were so far out. And that kind of scared the Romans. So that kind of opinion would be somewhat evident given that Celtic tribes established here had, they were not united societally and frequently waged wars with each other, but they also did have complex agricultural societies and they spoke a similar language. So it was a little bit varied and, a fair assessment by the Romans. A pre-Rome religion, the pagan religion, was followed with Druidism, similar to that of the Gauls in modern-day France. Human sacrifice was also practiced with Romans responded the same way that we might today. It was, seemed kind of, they were shocked and a little bit of hatred towards it. So their religion also valued the natural elemental world. They would personify animals as well. This is a human sacrifice dug up. I think it's Irish human sacrifice. At least it's evidence of it from an archaeological dig. They also claimed that writing things down hurt the memory. So a lot of the accounts are from Romans or from archaeological digs. Another quality of the people living in Britannia where they had blue paint and animal skins during warfare. That was another example of them being viewed as savages by the Romans. And I mentioned before that back on the other slide, the religion was also valued, they valued the natural and elemental world and would personify animals as well. Oh, I already said that. Okay, moving on. So according to Cassius Dio, another a Roman, he said that the ancient Britons can endure hunger and cold, any kind of hardship, where they plunge into the swamps and exist there for days with only their heads above water. They prepare a certain kind of food, eating a small portion of which the size of a bean prevents them from feeling either hunger or thirst. So again, this is another example of them kind of exaggerating this culture because they don't really know much about it. Okay, pre-colonized Britannia. So Augustus actually called for its invasion, but was usually called off doing it because of more important concerns for his reign. This was something his father was doing, or excuse me, Julius Caesar was doing before him, but couldn't get to. We'll get to that, but he was trying to follow in his footsteps. But again, more important things that he had to do. So Cunobelinus, king of Cativilani, a tribe in Britain, he expelled his son, went to Caligula for aid. This was after Augustus. And Caligula would actually declare the submission of Britain. This is strategic. It's just an excuse kind of to invade Britain. But he did call it off shortly before being murdered and was replaced by Claudius. And there's Claudius. We see him kind of, as we will see, just wants auctoritas. He wants that street cred so that he can, invade Britain and be better than Julius Caesar, who actually couldn't do it. So Augustus actually calls for its invasion, or excuse me, Rome could benefit from this, gaining resources, expanding trade, and furthering their territory. But this was mainly about auctoritas, as I said, for Emperor Claudius, who was seen as insecure and weak, hoping to do what Caesar was unable to do. So Britannia was an extremely valuable area, or excuse me, it was not. Rome knew this, but the territory was conquered and developed for the same reason Rome would constantly expand initially. Its tactic of preemptive striking after the sack of Rome by the Gauls in 390 BC, would begin that sort of mentality for the Romans. This would create, especially in Britannia, clearly militaristic ruling over these territories. And once again, I emphasize the main reason was for auctoritas, or just getting popular. That was what Claudius was intending to do. So for the Roman invasion, Julius Caesar in 54 BC, going back, he failed to conquer the Celts of Britannia. He attempted to justify his invasion by claiming their economic relationship with Gaul, proved they assisted Gaul. Again, there's a tie there, but it's kind of not really. It's a bad excuse. He extracted annual tribute, though, from some tribes who surrendered, though his goal of conquering did indeed fail. So the real invasion, after all this, in 43 AD, almost 100 years later, through Claudius, 40,000 Roman soldiers invaded northern Gaul, from northern Gaul to modern-day Kent over the Channel, 20,000 of which were professional soldiers and 20,000 were auxiliaries, recruited from fringes in the empire. And then a fort was established upon arrival, which kind of spoke to how Rome's relationship with Britannia would be. At least initially, a number of revolts happened, and as these tribes united in attempts to defend their land, Romans recorded that 11 tribes surrendered because they lacked the training, organization, and heavy armor that the Roman legions had. They acknowledged that there was a power here that was probably going to defeat them. Claudius actually attempted to bolster his image even further in this area by riding around on an elephant in Britannia, as you can see in the picture here. That's him on an elephant. And within 4 years, most of South Britain would be conquered with the help of local kings, Cogadubnus and Prasutagus. These are local king kind of, they're already warring. These kings recognize that it's an advantage to kind of go with the Romans. So administration in Britannia, things have settled. They are now in Britannia. Pretty well settled. So they have a governor and a procurator leading and reporting directly to the emperor. At this point, the province was run from Camulodunum on the southeast coast, and I'll see later. I'll show a picture of it, but it's on the southeast coast. And what you had were natives, native elites who would be allowed to join the administration if they kind of assimilated into the culture. And as time goes on, this would kind of help Romanize Britannia. Other changes within the decade, since conquering the large-scale urbanization took place, another contributor to this, the beginning of a coin-based economy, replaced the barter economy, another very important aspect of everyday life here, completely changed by the Romans. So also, again, Camulodunum also grew in population and into a Roman cultural center. And there it is on the southeast. Note Roman native relations. Towards the beginning of this, taxation, conscription, and discrimination occurred to the natives. So there was a lot of hostility building up initially, and so this would lead to a revolt under Boudica of the British Seni tribe in 60 AD or 61 AD. She would lead a revolt after her husband essentially dies, and then he promises in his will to, to Rome half of his estate and half of it to his daughters, but Rome disregards this, beats the wife, Boudica, and rapes or at least the two daughters are raped. So Boudica keeps this in mind, and there's a revolt in 60 or 61 AD. So that was quite interesting that he gave land to Nero, but Nero said, no, I want all of it, and this led to the revolt. The revolt would actually fail, but it would led to a lot of chaos, and 3 cities were destroyed, namely Camulodunum and Londinium. So 2 very important cities burned, but it was a turning point in that, you know, things were established as, or once the revolt was put down, that was kind of the end of any major revolts for the rest of the time that Rome was there. So sustaining Rome in Britannia. You have native elites that are present. So let's see. Okay. Its conquering was successful due to the desire of British elites to become Roman. You had Roman baths, Roman and Greek literary works and luxury works or goods from the empire that would attract wealthy natives of Britannia, who often became administrators. Again, these native elites helps to Romanize the area. The local elites actually paid for Roman buildings such as bathhouses and temples, not the central Roman government, which shows kind of a cultural shift in the area. Never had less than 3 legions occupied the territory as well. The culture's there, everything's moving towards Rome, but again, there's still problems with people living there occasionally, so they did need to have military occupying the territory at all times. So it was relatively hard to control. They never could leave, even towards the end of the time Rome was there. So Tacitus has a view of natives. He says, liking sprang up from our style of dress, and the toga became fashionable. All this in their ignorance they called civilization, when it was but a part of their servitude. So he's kind of saying that these natives, they are gleefully Romanizing, but they're really just serving, Rome, which was interesting that he acknowledges this. And it was, in my opinion, very true. So we have types of Roman settlements here. You had the colonii, military veterans, and Roman citizens lived here. And this was the largest type, the most elite. And then you had the municipia. Again, I'm terrible at pronouncing these words. I'm mostly reading them, so it's a bit more difficult. They were largely self-governed and smaller, and most were not citizens. Roman citizens, civitates, small urban centers with conquered natives. So that was most of the population was, that was not Roman. That was there, and then the Wiki were tiny settlements of mostly traders benefiting from trade from the army. So there was lots of economic stuff going on. So they benefited a lot, but important to note that 80 to 90% lived in rural areas, mostly peasant farmers. So we have Hadrian's Wall in 122 AD. Misconception: it was not to control the north. This was in the north territory, or to keep out people. It was used to collect taxes from people passing through, actually. So we have Rome's flight from Britannia. So once things started to settle down for, Rome, once they started to get terrible, they actually would leave Britannia in 410 AD, calling for the people living within its borders to defend themselves. The Roman Empire would fall some 60 years after anyway, so they're leaving because they have to go back and defend central territory. But despite Rome's departure, it remained Roman Britain, with aristocracy still controlling it. And despite them being given self-rule, they've left. They finally left. The Britons actually at this point demanded that they come back. They would be forced to create their own military and defense, modeled off of Rome. So it's kind of ironic. It's showing that culture has really sustained itself here, and they want to keep Rome culture and all aspects of life Roman here at this point. So Roman's legacy is extremely influential. That's kind of the conclusion. You have roads and cities such as Manchester, York, and London, as well as other aspects of infrastructure that would remain in these territories even after Rome fled. Christianity was significant as well. It was a part of Roman culture that would be, left behind to develop in Britannia. Roman gods would also be worshipped here now, which was a stark contrast from the animal and elemental gods from Rome's conquest. The Latin language would also continue to be used since elites kind of adopted it, to appear intelligent and advanced. Then it would bleed out into commoners slowly, during the time that Rome was in Britannia. So it also created military and defense similar to that of Romans once they left. The success of convincing Britain's native elites to Romanize would allow for much of Rome's culture and traditions to grow on the territory even after their departure. Very significant. Although there was still a need for the military presence to control revolts during this time, it would evolve into a crutch for the natives as they would slowly break down again upon Rome's military flight. So all this considered, this shows a serious amount of influence. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.